Welcome to 22 and 23. Today's topic is periods. First things first, why do we period? The whole point of a period is to basically flush out and freshen up the inside of the uterus lining in case of a potential pregnancy. And this all comes back to the menstrual cycle or period cycle and why we have it in the first place. For better or for worse, the point of a menstrual cycle is to prepare a body for pregnancy. Now, for most menstruating people, most of the time, pregnancy doesn't happen and we get a lot of periods. So let's talk about the menstrual cycle. What we mean by the menstrual cycle is the time between the start of two periods. So when someone is measuring their cycle, you start day 1 of your period and then count the days all the way up to the day right before your next period. And that's how long your menstrual cycle is. We have the period at the start of the menstrual cycle, which is bleeding and clotting and stuff coming out of the vagina. And then about halfway through, or 14 days before the next period, is something called ovulation, which is the release of an egg from an ovary. Now, around the time of ovulation is when the inside of the uterus or the uterine lining is most fluffy and hospitable for a potential pregnancy. It's just the way kind of the hormones and timing sync up. But if the egg does not implant into the wall of the uterus, then the body says, oh, gotta freshen up. Let's do this again next month. And then again, about 14 days after ovulation is your next period. And it's just a continuous cycle over and over of let's make this a nice fluffy environment for an egg. Oh, no egg? Okay, let's get ready again. Over and over and over again. We call it a cycle because it is very predictable and it's run by a set of hormones that are released from our brain and signal to our body for all of these events to happen. Now, there's a set of normal for every menstrual cycle, keeping in mind everybody is different. But the reason that we define normal is that anytime that symptoms or a period cycle is outside of the range of normal, those are times when we can talk and say, hey, maybe there's something else going on here, or let us help you. So the normal menstrual cycle, again, day 1 of a period to the day right before the next period, is on average around 24 to 38 days. Furthermore, it should be regular. So no matter what your cycle time is, if it's 24 days versus 38, it should be that about exactly the same every month. Periods usually last from 2 to 7 days. So again, everyone's a little bit different. And the average amount of blood loss per period is 3 to 5 tablespoons total. All of the days of the period. So if you feel like you are bleeding more than that, talk to your doctor. The last thing that is normal is cramps. So cramps can be very normal, a sign of the uterus contracting and squeezing out some of the contents of the uterine lining. That can start actually the day or so before a period and then last the next couple of days or so the first couple days of a period. They can be painful, but they shouldn't be so painful that they're interfering with daily activities. It's okay to take an NSAID or like an ibuprofen or an naproxen, which is what I prefer for cramps, but if that doesn't cover it, talk to your doctor. Cramps can be felt in the groin or the lower abdomen or the back or even sometimes around the butthole. All of it would be normal. One other thing that can cause cramps, ovulation. So you might feel a little bit of cramping, not too much, less than like a day's worth around the time of ovulation. So sometime between your two periods. It's called middle schmerz and it can be normal. The last thing I want to talk about is when to see a doctor. So again, if your period falls outside of these parameters of normal, certainly chat with your doctor. It's normal for a period to be abnormal in the first couple of years of having a period. So like if you just started your first period and it's been a year or so and you're still not normal, that can be expected. But whenever you have concerns about your regularity, you can certainly talk to your doctor. Other times, if you're worried that you're having too much blood loss, there can be clotting disorders that can cause excessive blood loss. And then if cramping is too much, talk to your doctor. You really don't have to put up with it. And then finally, the absence of a period, or if your period schedule is irregular and you've been having your period for a few years, there are certainly things that can happen that can cause your period schedule to temporarily sort of be out of whack. Obviously, the first one is pregnancy, but if you're not pregnant, then there are some other things like stress or excessive exercise, low body weight, or even physical illness that can cause changes to your menstrual cycle. But if things don't kind of self-correct after a few months, talk to your doctor. There are other conditions that we really do want to check for just to make sure that that's not contributing to your abnormal period schedule. Now, on to your questions. Question number 1. Is it possible to get vaginal spotting before a period if you're currently fighting off a cold or the flu? Sure. Like I was saying before, there are some things that can naturally throw off a period cycle, including physical illness or emotional stress. Both of those things can release some cortisol and mess with the natural flow of your period, or the hormone regulation of your period. And so it's quite possible that physical illness can throw off your period just a little bit, but it should correct next month. Question number 2. Before my period came, I had some light spotting for about 2 to 3 days, and then my period came. It only lasted for 3 days, which is unusual because it lasts for 6 days usually. It also had clots. Is this a sign of implantation bleeding? A lot of people worry about pregnancy risk and confusion of, is this a period versus implantation bleeding? So back when I was talking about what a period is and what the body's preparing for, when a fertilized egg implants into the wall of the uterus, that's called implantation. And some people experience a little bit of spotting or light bleeding for a day or two. It should really be maybe light pink or brown. Shouldn't really be full-on bleeding or period bleeding, especially not with clots. And so I would say what you experienced is probably not implantation bleeding. When in doubt, take a pregnancy test, but implantation bleeding is generally maybe like 24 to even maybe 48 hours at the most. And it's lighter in color and shouldn't be heavy enough to fill up like a pad or a tampon. So when in doubt though, take a pregnancy test. Question number 3. I missed my period for 10 days, so on the 7th day, I was reading some stuff that would induce my period, and I've started taking 8,000 milligrams of vitamin C. I took this for 3 days. Does it work? There are a lot of claims and reports and people making suggestions about natural ways to induce your period. Vitamin C has not consistently been shown to influence someone's period. If your period started, great, but that would not typically be something that we would recommend to start your period. If you did want to start your period, talk to your doctor and we can give you like a hormone burst, so a short burst of some hormones that jumpstart your period. Question number 4. I went 3 months without having a period and now I have been on my period for 2 months. What could be the issue? Okay, so 1, it depends on where you are in your timeline of having periods. If this is within your first couple of years of having a period, this could certainly be normal. That being said, anybody who experiences bleeding for 2 months, definitely talk with your doctor. I would worry that you're losing too much blood and talk to your doctor. But tough to say for sure what's going on. Obviously a little bit of hormone dysregulation abnormalities, but talk with your doc. Question number 5. My periods are miserable for me. I bleed for 11 to 14 days and only have around a week or two in between periods. I don't get cramps in my abdominal area, but lower in my vagina. I don't know what to do or how to tell my doctor about this because it makes me embarrassed. Okay, first of all, everyone with female anatomy gets a period, and so I know this can be really uncomfortable to talk about, but it's something that half the population experiences. So try not to feel embarrassed about it. If it makes you more comfortable to find a female doctor, that's great. If you can talk to your parents about it or your mom, that's also really helpful. Maybe they can sort of advocate for you with the doctor. But I would, in your case in particular, really encourage you to talk to a doctor, because there could certainly be some bleeding or clotting problems that are contributing to your prolonged bleeding. So I would definitely recommend talking to a doctor. I'm sorry, but just try to keep in mind a lot of people go through this. In fact, you could even maybe like write it down or show them like what you sent me and say, look, this is really embarrassing. Can you please just read this? And maybe that'll work. Whatever makes you most comfortable, but I do think it's worth talking to a doctor. Question number 6. I'm really worried about something. I recently started the combination pill. My boyfriend and I fooled around but never have had sex. My question is, am I supposed to get my period on the 4th week of the birth control? And if I don't, does that mean I'm pregnant? So what you said here is you recently started taking the pill. And if you're not having sex, the chance of pregnancy is none. So what I suspect is happening is that the pills, which I didn't mention also can change your hormone cycle or your menstrual cycle. Starting taking hormone pills definitely can influence your period. And so it can take a few months for things to really regulate out. I would give it a little bit more time. Don't panic, but make sure that you're taking the pills around the same time of day, every day, and then take those placebo pills as well if you're wanting your period. But it'll eventually get very predictable, or it should. So I would say if after a few months or so things haven't fixed themselves, it's definitely worth talking to a doctor. Question number 7. I got off birth control in March, but it took 6 months for me to have regular periods again, which can happen. My cycles were 38 days, but I recently moved states and now my period is off again, like light brown spotting instead of a period, and now over 30 days late. Should I worry? Okay, that's a bummer. Your body has certainly gone through some changes with the hormones, and then getting off of them, and then moving, which could be stressful, could be different time zones, new friends. There's a lot to think about here. So then your question, should you worry? No. Can something be done about it? Yeah. I would talk to your doctor if you can find one, but we can usually just give a short burst of hormone pills, like 7 to 10 days, that really resets your cycle and makes you have a period, and then you should sort of get into your normal flow again. So that's what I would advise. It can be really uncomfortable when you're wondering, oh my gosh, is my period coming today? Why didn't it come? So yeah, just talk to your doctor. Question number 8. Can you still be pregnant if you've gotten your period multiple times after having sex? So no. I know this is a huge source of anxiety for a lot of people, but it's just not possible to have full-on period shedding of the lining of the uterus and still have an implanted embryo or fetus. It's just not possible. The whole process, and that's why I explained what is going on and why we have periods in the first place, is because, one, hormone regulation when a fetus or an embryo implants into the wall of the uterus should stop periods anyway. So that in and of itself should say, nope, it's just not possible. The hormones that regulate having a period are changed once an embryo has implanted. But 2, the whole point of a period is to sort of freshen up the uterine lining so that an embryo can be implanted. And so, no, I know this is a huge source of anxiety for people who are worried about being pregnant, but it's just not possible. Question number 9. I've read that you can still get your period with cryptic pregnancy. Thoughts? So cryptic pregnancy is also, I mean, this is kind of like the last question too, but a lot of people are terrified that they're pregnant and don't know it. It is possible to have a little bit of bleeding while you're pregnant, and that's going to be person to person, and that's always something to talk to your doctor about. But you will never have full-on periods when you're pregnant. It's just not possible. So if you are still experiencing your regular every 28 days period bleeding, there is absolutely no way you have a hidden pregnancy. No cryptic pregnancy. It's just not possible. Again, it's possible when someone is pregnant to experience a little bit of spotting here and there. Always something to talk to a doctor about, but that spotting is never going to be a full-on period. So I know this is just a big source of anxiety for a lot of people, but just not possible. All right, question number 10. For the past year, my periods have been very short and light. I rarely will see red blood. It's usually dark brown throughout the entire cycle, which I didn't talk about earlier. It can be very normal to have a variety of shades and textures of period blood. So I've had my period since I was 12, and it has always been heavy the first 2 to 3 days with bright red blood. I'm now 21, and this is the only time I'm not seeing red at all. I'm worried that this means something is wrong or I'm infertile. I've taken probably around 10 to 12 Plan B, so the morning after pills over the course of 4 years. I was a dumb college kid. No, you were actually smart for taking Plan B. Could this be the cause of the change in my period? Or does the only brown mean something bad? So again, periods come in all shades and textures. It has no indication of infertility. A couple of things to consider though. First of all, we do know that as a person has periods, they change for the person. So it could just be that your periods are now a little bit lighter. The other thing to consider is your use of the morning after pill. So you were not dumb, you were smart. But it is important to know that the morning after pill is a huge dose of hormones. And the whole point is that it upsets your normal cycle. And so it's quite possible that your hormones are still a little bit all over the place. It's very unlikely that anything is wrong with you. Period blood, color, texture is not an indicator of infertility at all. But if you want to get your period back on track, a doctor can help you sort of reset things like I've discussed in many other questions, but you weren't dumb. Okay, so that concludes this episode of 22 and 23.